Okay, good morning, Veronica, and welcome to Spirit Horse Radio. And we're doing this on Zoom, even though we aimed somehow to be in the flesh talking, which is always nice. Perhaps you'll be able to visit us in Wales one day, because I know you're very well connected there, if not indeed from there.
Yeah.
Are you in Portugal now?
Not yet.
Okay.
We've got one more week and then we'll be going down for the season. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think I'm in Ireland. Are you somewhere in the UK then?
Yes, I'm in Cornwall.
Okay, okay. So good morning, and you and your team got in touch and said you'd like to be on here. I had a look at your website. It's the first time we've met, so we haven't really done anything together. But I had a look at your website. It seems that you're very much ploughing the same kind of furrow as us,
Hmm.
perhaps younger and full of hope and energy. Whereas I've been a long time, pushing walking behind those war horses to make the furrow. But yes, the return to something ancestral. Let's go into that in a minute. The
Hmm.
return to roots. Let's say what those might be. Uh, Working deeply inside, immersively in nature seems to be part of your thing, and then a little bit of psychedelics thrown in there. And you're also, I see, very committed to working with story. Let's go there again later on. But throwing those things out, those were the common factors. Those were the themes, it seems, that you're giving to the world. But let's start with you. How did your you I don't exactly know what you do at all, but you're involved in this. What got you going? What got you started? You're on a bit of a mission, aren't you? Somehow or other, you got something. You founded something. You started something. Why bother?
Mm. Well, firstly, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. And I'm very excited to come visit Spirit Horse because I'm from West Wales and I
Ah,
yearn for it. I think of that word hiraeth, I yearn for that home that I no longer have because my mum actually sold the farm that I grew up on. So I was very blessed to have a totally nature immersed childhood, a lot of folklore and Welsh culture around me, but also my mum was English. And so, also already at quite a young age, questioning that sense of belonging.
ah,
I mean, I remember being at school and not being allowed to learn the instruments that were available to the Welsh kids, to the really Welsh kids. I was born in Wales, but I really wanted to learn the harp. And so there was that very early on that tension. So it's been a question. I moved away to the city and to really pull the story short, I suppose, experienced a chronic health crisis and all the different levels physical, emotional, spiritual,
ah.
very overwhelmed by what was happening in the world and also what was happening in my body. And through the many whisperings in the wind, I ended up being immersed in indigenous healing traditions of the Americas, of all places, as
Mm-hmm.
seems to be quite an archetypal story for many people who have the privilege to be able to travel afar to experience such things. And completely fell in love with the art of togetherness, of ceremony, of ritual, of the awe and the mystery that you can tap into when you are in nature in an animate way, when you awaken that sense of animate into being. And so ever since I had a big, great big life change, what to do with this love and this awe and this creativity and this longing. It really came from a place of grief and longing to try and find those roots again back home. And it's still an ongoing process, but I'm inviting people with me along the way of what does it mean to belong and really re-inhabit place and to heal, not just in the individualistic paradigm, but to heal together in community and in relationship with the more than human kin as well.
Yeah, well, the Welsh, of course, have this beautiful idea, this hiraeth, and the impossible to find home, or maybe you found it once or felt it somewhere. But strangely enough, we go looking for home, it seems, and maybe find it far, far away. So which Americas? Amazon, you mean, or in North South? Where did you find a little piece of home?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the topic of home is so big. I felt belonging there. I definitely didn't feel home. I didn't feel that answer to Hiraeth, but I landed and nestled into Ecuador,
Ah,
um,
yeah.
with teachers and medicine keepers there and a community there, and went first as a participant in a retreat experience with plant medicines and ended up volunteering, and then ended up actually getting a job there for almost a year. And then later I went back and ended up very serendipitously in Mexico for over a year as well, again exploring healing traditions and also just yeah, learning, absorbing as much as I possibly could, whilst dancing with that question of, is it okay for me to be here? Am I contributing to something
Mm.
good or not? And I did keep hearing the calling to come home. And it's been so beautiful because there's so much community here on these lands. There's so many teachers and wisdom keepers like yourself and storytellers, people carrying those ancient threads. And to know that it's all here. It's all here on our doorstep.
Yeah, it's all made somewhere, but I think you've made the journey that we have to make. I've done a little bit of it too. All right, so from where from where we start, our own, you had some vaguely like a connection there to Wales and the Celts and so forth. And a lot of people think that I was somehow immersed in some wonderful Irish storytelling tradition and therefore,
Mhm.
so connected to my roots. Nothing could be further from the truth, really. That we're generations and generations and hundreds of years away from what might be called a real living root. Perhaps that there is, some bardic harp playing, the use of words and spells and stories to weave the people and the land and the community. We're a long way away from that. That's certainly not where I came from. But you made that journey. You've gone to somewhere where people really are maybe a little bit closer to their wild jungle. You were in Ecuador. You say like we've had a couple of Ecuadorian, or well, maybe they wouldn't call themselves that, but shamans from that area, from Ecuador, with their bases there. In fact, one of them, Kurikindi, wanted us to go and build roundhouses for him. I thought, well, surely you guys know how to build your own roundhouses out there, don't you? You really liked our one. And I draw him pictures and everything like that. It's easy. You put the posts in the ground, put the rafters up. But I feel like somewhere there they lost a few things. I don't know. I've not been there, so I don't know. But certainly, if people are not living in a wild forest, a jungle, have not got that immediate, uh, undestroyed place to live, then they will have lost something. And they will have lost something of their story, they will have lost something of their ceremonies, they will have lost something of their community. All those things are all interconnected. It's a huge tapestry,
Mhm.
isn't it? So I think, well, I get the sense from that you saw something, maybe you didn't find home, and maybe you had to return to where you come from, of course. But you nevertheless had to make that journey to go somewhere where things are maybe just vibrating that little bit nearer to the
Mhm.
to wild nature. And I know that I went to some trouble to find the wildest place in Wales that I could, or maybe it found me actually. You from the pictures you've got on your website, you also gone to Portugal and Wales looking for that same thing somewhere. First of all, like a landscape that at least would be reminiscent of of that ancient place where we
Mm.
lost so much. So you made a journey there. You must have, I don't know, experienced some kind of tribal living, and maybe with medicine too, which we're not going to avoid that subject. I thought I'll stay away from that, but no, we're going to go there because uh, for amazing the people who've gone to Ecuador or people who've gone to the Amazon, if they've gone there and experienced people who are still that incredibly intimately wound up with the original spirit of things, they've usually got an intact way in, which is maybe medicine, maybe ayahuasca, maybe something else, and that maybe that's what we need in our culture to reawaken it, because we got 1,000 or 2,000 years separating us from a really what you might call an original place where we and nature, and therefore the songs, the stories, the community are really moving together. I don't want to be a downer. I always want people to recognize we lost a lot, and then if we're going to find it or find inspiration, we probably will have to make quite a big journey. We won't
Mm.
find it at the bottom of the Welsh garden or the bottom of the Irish field, or the bottom of a terrible city where I came from. But
Mm.
tell me a little bit more. What do you what? Tell me a little bit more of what got you going.
Yeah, yeah. It's I seem to struggle to avoid the topic of sacred plant medicines and fungi medicines because they have played such a big role
Yeah.
in my life. And essentially waking up something that was already there. When I was a child, I saw the world as animate. I
Uh-huh.
felt the sense of place and spirit and place. I didn't have language for it, but I absolutely remember feeling it. And I lost that in this culture that's so modern and industrialized and tells everyone that we have to be productive and do all the time. And my body simply was not made for that paradigm. And it broke down in the attempt to be in the city and do what seemed to be the thing that everyone does.
Mm,
Um, and so, yeah, that piece you spoke about of really finding wilderness
mm.
was huge. I think the land heals us, and that can happen in a multiplicity of ways. When we heal the land, it heals us, but also when we're in land that hasn't been as harmed and as manipulated, then our psyches and ourselves also start to be rewilded. And the medicines, their role in that just opened those doors to awe and wonder and connection and a different kind of knowing. I think before I've always been spiritually curious, but I can really see there was me pre plant ceremonies and medicines that was curious, and I'd have philosophical discussions. And then afterwards, it was just a totally different way of seeing and feeling myself as part of the world that I didn't need to necessarily try and scientifically understand. It was just
Yeah.
there and
Mm,
felt. Um, and I think in the modern psyche, we have a tendency to reduce things to their parts and try to understand things and by atoms and taking things apart in a sort of left brain dominant
yeah.
culture. And the medicines in that sense are bringing us back into that right brain, into the bigger pictures and patterns of existence. And it woke me up, and
Mm,
it wakes many people up. I share
mm.
the stories carefully because I also recognize in the psychedelic community or the renaissance that's kind of happening within science and in the West. Um, I also see an untethering and a lack of rootedness, and a bit of kind of spiritual consumerism that does tend to happen.
Yes.
But we're all hungry, aren't we? We're so hungry for that sense of
Yeah.
connection again.
Yeah.
Um,
I know. So the magic is there, and I'm again not to be negative, but I'm always wary. My antennae is up that we in our culture have first of all to see how damaged we are, and all of us. We maybe we can rediscover everything. We can reconnect with our ancestors. We can rebuild our ceremonies. We can refind our songs. And I always have the kind of, yeah, how? How are you going to do that? You got to do it next Saturday afternoon, are you? You know, at a little workshop in the woods. That's no, that's you're talking about 2, 3 thousand years of destruction. You're not going to put that
mm,
together by having a talking circle. You're not,
mhm,
and then also if you start to import things into that place of grief and loss and brokenness and wreckness and alienation and so forth. Most of us went to school where we were indoctrinated, out of doing what we feel like doing and into doing stuff we don't feel like doing. Most of us had, 15 or 20 or 25 years of education in that. So it's not. At the same time, I don't want to avoid the subject because it's too interesting. At the same time, I have not seen any way that people in their own journey, they could spend 10 years, 20 years meditating, going through ancestral rites, trying to rediscover rituals. I did. Um, Working away with ancient stories, which are an excellent way to tap into the old stuff. That's the only hope we have in some ways. But still in all, that's long, hard work on yourself. Or you could drink the medicine for 3 nights in a row and you would cover a vast amount of ground, which does not mean to say it's the answer to everything. At the same time, be careful about what what we're that in what context that revelation is happening. And then of course, yeah, it get the whole mad commercial thing that's going on in the world is impossible to stop. No one's found a way to stop it. Like I haven't met anyone who's found a way to do it. It's like Yeah, we found a way. We haven't got cars, we haven't got chainsaws, we don't use electricity. Everything's fine. We're all growing our own food, and we're totally at peace. You know, the whole world is clamoring, and this sort of this incredible intensity of activity, and it's just faster and faster getting worse. So even to put a workshop on, even to be like we are in Wales, idealistically, and I started so idealistically, let's do at the bottom of the waterfall in a teepee, let's be as natural as possible. But if we're going to do it and offer it to the world, these days you have to join in with the how the word gets spread. We started with little scraps of paper that we passed around among friends, and that doesn't work anymore. Now there's that technology, whatever, or even doing this, having a chat, and then who knows? People all over the world might listen to this chat next week, whenever we release it. So quite an incredible, mad thing we have to quite a mad dance to balance things. But yeah, I suppose I'm making my point, but I want to ask you how you see it. That the medicine does speed things up. Ayahuasca,
Mm.
particularly, all of that conditioning we went through. Like people often say, it's like 10 or 20 years of therapy, all that undoing of 20 years of education. That takes too long. The world's in danger. But if the medicine is an incredible catalyst, and perhaps that's why it's here, who knows? And that's why maybe we have to make that journey. And maybe that's why the Ecuadorian shamans and the Amazonian shamans and their communities and the way they live is like almost the only hope, because there's not like lots of time left. So many things have gone
Mm.
extinct and are going extinct during the time that we're having this conversation. Not just animals, but plants and languages and ways of being, ways of sharing land, ways of living in jungle and forest and savannah, and the jungle and the forest, the savannah themselves are disappearing. So uh, I'm yeah, I want to give some time to praise that, and people that have
Mm.
adventures like you, and you somehow something's got you going. You've had some kind of initiation, and now you're doing something to it.
Mm. I really hear you with that tension of living the old ways and really reviving it and the work that must go in to make that happen, because that's the dream. All me and my peers, we're all calling in the land, the people, the simple voluntary simplicity. I often fantasize about the internet just disappearing and
Yeah.
petrol disappearing, and we just have to start riding horses again and growing food. And people say that's a really privileged thing to say, and I'm like, well, I'm sorry. I fantasize about it. I long for it. Um, and at the same time, it's so interesting, this international dance. I mean, we're doing this with rooted healing. We don't have our own land yet, so we're working in places where we're allowed to do certain things. And we have chosen to work with psilocybin in many of our gatherings,
Mm.
um, because of exactly what you're saying. It feels like it's this wide opening doorway to so many people from different walks of life to suddenly have a profound relationship with nature and
Mm-hmm.
with themselves and with each other.
Yes.
But we focus on nature because that really is life. That's how we relate with life. If you don't feel enchanted by looking at an insect crawling up some bark or the dewdrops on the morning grass, then you've fallen out of love with life. And the medicines will help us. They'll help that consciousness expansion and that sense of connection again, really activating it like a child's eyes. And at the same time, I also recognize how it can easily play into that instant gratification culture, and be commercialized in its own sense. Our psilocybin retreats are big investments simply because there's so many costs involved in curating something in the way that I think the Western mind wants. You want a psychologist, you want a certain number of facilitators and a certain aesthetic of space. But that's maybe a story that will keep evolving, for me at least. This is something we're exploring and working through, with how we're doing it. But our gatherings in North Wales, for example, ancestral is a sense of just inhabiting that ancient life, which is something you're doing as well. And what I find with these spaces that are more simple in a sense, okay, we're going to sit in circle, we're going to make things with our hands, we're going to have councils and talk, and we'll breathe together and we'll forage and we'll go on little mini vigils in the woods. Um, that feels like the more rooted, truly regenerative type of ceremony and way to be together. But I think the mushroom ceremonies are they see that they're wanted. You know, people are waking up, they're watching these documentaries on TV, they want a big experience. And I think it takes a big experience because we've learned so much to numb and to think in a certain way, like you say, indoctrinated
Yeah.
by schooling. We need something radical. And you can't get much more radical than the rooted folk.
Yeah, no, I think we do. We need to rebel and need to be radical and not to be shy about that. I really, I want to praise what you're doing and what the people are trying to do. And even where it goes a bit wrong, the light that led astray was light from heaven. We're going to have to make mistakes. I'm trying to write a book about our own experiments and the early days of spirit horses around, between say 90 and 94, 95, when we first started doing rituals. And we 10-day rituals, really big, long things. But looking back, now that I had some training and I know a bit more, we did some quite silly things, but the gods loved our mistakes. There was some forgiveness in it all. I wouldn't now, knowing what I know, I can't let myself off the hook. But back then, we did our best, and it was like there's something good about it. Something okay about making mistakes, something okay about
Mm,
getting it wrong, and we have to do something, and no one knows what to do. We can't say, "Oh, we've worked it all out." Definitely not a spirit horse. I never say that, and I'm going to all quote me, and I'm not going to say it either. Like we've made the first step in what might take me 1,000-year task of recreating culture, and we might not have 1,000 years, of course, and who knows what will happen. But that just trying to do it gives you a chance to kind of live as you'd want to live according to your own deepest nature, or so forth, or to go back. I like what you say about childhood, and those seeds that are planted. It was we all have similar stories, a little maybe glimpses of the garden, the field, the forest, the wild, the animals, the plants. That sort of summer morning when you walked into a dew-drenched field and everything was perfect, and that, like I remember those things when I was little, and no one seemed to be interested in that kind of magic. Everyone was busy pushing the cows around or else going to the factory, and uh, that reconnection with medicine really brings that back to anybody at any age. That wonderful openness you have at childhood, that love for the world, that intimacy
mm.
that's just there. I mean, according to some of my teachers, that starts to die off in your teenage years, and you lose a lot of it after 19. You have to really work at it if you want to be a 40-year-old person that still has that, the world pouring through you. Every
Mm.
cell breathing. But even living wild in nature, and even trying to run retreats and spend like 8 months living the teepee lifestyle and stuff. We've gone into roundhouses. Teepees are a waste of time in Wales, but living in some structure that's close to the earth and so forth, with our feet there and our bums not too far away from it. Even there, it can end up being busy doing things. And
Yeah.
I've noticed, like with a little bit of mushrooms or something, you can walk past the same tree every day, and then all of a sudden, it's a being.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, hello, and yeah, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to say hello last time. And that intimacy, like our
Mm.
culture is kill that. I mean, it's regarded as childish, not childlike and beautiful. As what's that going to produce? All I knew about the world when I was a kid was that I don't want to join in. And then I became a teenager, and I was absolutely. Everyone said, "Oh, you'll settle down after a while. You'll be like everybody else." I was like, "The one thing I'm not going to do is be like everybody else." And I don't want a job. I don't want a car. I don't want any of it. I want that magic that I felt when I was in the fields among the stones and felt the rain coming on. That's what I wanted. I wanted to live that forever. But so yeah, those seeds of childhood. I like what you say. I mean, we are almost like, and then when you get older, I'm getting pretty old these days, but those early childhood experiences seem even more precious and more fundamental, and they're the original stepping. Something gets set in stone, and it's almost like that's the story, and then the other decades will be living that out.
Mm.
Returning to that innocence and simplicity, and yeah,
Yeah.
really, really throwing away all the baggage that one accumulates. We learn a few tricks. We learn how to get by in the world and how to be savvy to some extent or other. But the innocence, the wild. I'm always praising the Cinderella story, which is maybe not one of these big legends that might create culture for us, but actually it's the most popular story in the world over the last 10,000 years. So the little girl who doesn't fit in, doesn't get to have the the socially the social graces. She doesn't get invited to the parties. She doesn't really know. She doesn't get the approval of the parents. She's just kind of sweeping the floor and minding the fire. But she does, because of her social ineptitude, her connection to nature and the wild and the, because it's not really a prince that she marries. It's the wild. It's the
Mm.
invisible being. She the holy part of her is preserved, and maybe well, that's what I say. I'm always welcoming when people come to Spearhorse and telling them that story, and welcoming the wild part of them, the part of them that didn't fit in at school, that didn't pass the exams, and didn't learn to wear a suit, and didn't get a good job, and didn't learn all the social graces. The part of us that was not able to join in. Every culture in the world has a version of Cinderella. The part of
Mm.
us that was not able to join in socially is the wild, beautiful, natural, un what's the word, uncontrived part of us.
Mm.
It has no falsehood in it, and it might make us seem a little bit, not so clever in a social role, but other
It's the stigma,
societies have a
isn't it?
way. Other societies had a way of preserving that naturalness, and I think most of us in our culture, let's say, Western Europe, anywhere really, don't know what it's like to be a wild, natural person and to follow your instincts. So we're really have been taught to do things we don't feel like doing, and
Yeah,
we ended up
absolutely.
wrecking the earth. We don't really know how we can do it. We know the facts and figures, but we don't have the same feeling. And the medicine tends to open that up, so you really do fall in love with your own wild nature and nature itself. It becomes a great big living thing, and not this dead thing that we were taught about. Sorry, I'm doing all talking. Tell me more about what you're doing and what you're trying to do.
No, I feel total resonance with everything you're saying, and what comes to mind is for me is that not only that conditioning we have to break through with the work that reconnects or whatever it is we're putting our minds to, but yeah, the stigma that's still so alive from that original, I would say, the the Norman conquest or something, where really the church started taking over all the sacred wells, all the pagan sites, and
Mm.
not to just point fingers and blame, oh, it's the church, but there's
Yeah.
been this shift and this deep stigma of people who are then connected to nature. I grew up thinking, if I hug a tree and get spotted for it, I will get called names at school. And
Mm.
of course I was called things at school because I'd get protective of the flowers that are getting trampled and things like that. But I recognize that with the people who come to our retreats, more so the psilocybin ones than, say, the ancestral ones. It feels like people have already kind of walked quite a lot of a rewilding path on those ones. But the psilocybin ones, people are coming from all walks of life, but a lot of, burnout and the modern linear sort of ladder that we've been conditioned to be on.
Hmm.
And a lot needs to be done to break through that stigma of, oh, this is just for hippies. And it's so strong. And
Mm.
I really try to address that because it's also, you want to honor the ritual and really hold that strongly and honor the intensity of what we're doing. And of course, we bring in play and joy and celebration, but we hold something that a lot of people don't believe in yet. And you have to kind of try and meet them in that disbelief and in that inner critique and in that fear of simply doing something that a hippie, does. And it's just this stereotype that I think stems right from those days of civilization and the church stomping out all of these earth spiritualities where we of course worshipped in our grove of trees. So that that just even being able to connect with the tree in a profound way,
Mm.
thankfully, I'm seeing the younger generations move through this stigma. I'm seeing a lot of things, even on social media of all places. Um, but yeah, it's strong, and there's a lot to break through there.
There is a,
Um,
but it's quite funny too. I meet some people and I say, "Well, you haven't really got enough hippie in you, have you? You know, they've been in the corporate world a long time, or they've quite, you know, they've done well in other fields, and then they're fighting to get back, and you know, they'll recite a Rumi poem around the fire or something, but it's still a bit sort of trying for it, and they're no, no, I want to be a proper hippie. That's kind of fun when people are like, no, I wanted. I said, all right, it's not so uncool anymore, but I know what you mean, and the the 2,000 years of history in Europe, you know, we all know the 13th century, the war on the feminine, the war on nature, the war on all the old pagan roots. That's a devastating history. That's why maybe we do maybe have to make a little trip to the Amazon or invite them here to teach us something. They didn't have that 2,000 years of stuff. They had it imposed on them, you know, in the last few hundred
mm,
years, of course, and they've had to try and survive it. But it's a devastating, awful history, and people arguing about all those little, the blood of Christ and all the religious wars and all. That's a huge, massive, enormous psychic field of intolerance. And there's only one thing, and there's only one way, and we see the fruits of it now. You know, that when that religion was overturned, we ended up with science, and so now we've got this dead world, nothing's alive. So the culture is like desperate for something. I know you know all this stuff, but just
mm,
to paint that picture about that stigma point you brought up, and I do believe there was a chance there in the '60s when people sort of went a bit wild. It was
mm.
things were so boring and dead that something had to give somewhere, and it came very, you know, it came out of the culture itself, the scientific sort of the scientific branch produced this chemical that woke people up to God, and then all people said, "Let's have love, peace, and forgiveness," and it was
Yeah.
like, what? What a load of rubbish that is! And the world said, "No, that's not good enough. You know, we've
Well,
got to carry
Nixon
on."
said no, yeah.
Yeah, Nixon is that. Well, obviously not everybody did, but you know, it did get trivialized, and perhaps it was very childish. But what else could it have been except other than a childlike? You know, I didn't live through that. I'm not that old, but there were still traces of it when I was growing up, and of an idealism and a hope that there was a kind of hippie thing that it was beautiful. It was a
Yeah.
great vibe to be part of. It was, yeah, love and peace and happiness. We don't know how we're going to make it happen. We're going to try, and let's not go to war. And that was like the ecstatic collectiveness of it was really something like, you know, unless something like that happens again, hopefully more maturely, more, you know, lots in
Mm,
those days, yoga and Tai Chi, or anything was brand new and crazy and hippie, you know, and everything. Nowadays, you know, if you do Tantra, yoga, Tai Chi, and belly dance, it's just normal. You're just keeping
mm.
fit or something, you know. But in those days, it was really wild.
Yeah.
So maybe without the groundswell, perhaps there could be a new revolution. I mean, it's crazy to talk about revolution, but something has to happen very quick. And I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and we're going to carry on having to go what we're doing. But it's a shame of the, you know, one, our childhood wonder is thrown away. It's turned, brutalized into something that's better at making money, or
Mm,
you know, you'll fit into the job market better if you do this. What's the job market? Another whole operation that's doing no
mm,
good at all to the world. Where are the, you know, where are the young people and where are the elders who will take on the situation? We've got a wrecked world and it needs something urgently doing to it. It's still fighting against these laws. You know, you can do your mushroom things in Portugal. We can't do them in Wales, where the mushrooms grow. You know, I can't offer anything like that. And I know people who sincerely would want to do something culturally and rewild people, rewild the land. It's still incredibly um, suspect of anything to do with medicine, mushrooms, or something. Where the how are we going to create enough awakening that something really good might happen? There needs to be
mm,
lots and lots of people, and it's kind of
mhm.
hopeful that there are all sorts of people who've got their square life sorted out, and maybe they've got all the trappings of it, and they're still going to the jungle or to their rituals and ceremonies. So you know that you talk about that stigma, but surely somewhere down the line, we need that again. You know, it was uncool to be a breadhead back in the day. You know, in the early '70s and everything. It was really cool to not want much and to not have much. It was
Mm,
genuinely like nice, you know. The status symbols shifted, and then they re-erected themselves. So that was a really hopeful sign that status symbols changed. You know that, oh, you
yeah.
haven't got much. Oh, that's cool. You know, I want to be with you. Like you've got a
Yeah.
guitar and some songs, and you've been on a journey, and you haven't had a job for 3 years. That's cool. Whereas that those values got lost. So I don't know what will happen again. Let me throw it back at you if you don't mind. Maybe we don't know what's going to happen, do we? But how hopeful do you feel? How optimistic are you?
I go through cycles, especially being a cyclical woman. I think when I'm in my inner autumn, I feel just total grief
Yeah,
and I see it all breaking down. And I
yeah,
think we're not doing anything quick enough. And I just grieve. And those are the moments where I need to feel at least some kind of connection in the land and to just allow the grief to flow and not trying to be again in productive mode or pretending that everything's fine.
yes,
Um, and then in my inner spring and summer, I'm full of hope and optimism and energy. And I think that we do need a revolution. I think the roots of one are really starting to take hold. And I mean, something we're doing that we're putting a lot of energy into with the work is an online course called Deepen Your Roots. And it's all about bioregional re-inhabitation at an animate, really intimate level. And that's where I place my hope in people rooting down and actually coming into relationship with their local watershed, seeing it as a relative, um, coming into relationship with the flora and fauna, with their local community, bringing all of their efforts in their life into alignment with how they're truly feeling deep down inside in the essence of who they are. I think we don't have time to be out of alignment anymore. Like
yeah.
life is too short, and we've been given this gift with a certain level of privilege here in Britain. I can speak for people here. Um, to have choice, to have a lot of choice. And I think where I see hope and courage and strength is the people who are really connected locally. They're doing wonderful things. They're guardians of their waterways. They're, um, part of the right to row movement or whatever it is that we
Yeah.
find as our kind of ecological niche or our mythopoetic identity, that we are together, that we have to do it together, that it is happening. And it's that sense of Joanna Macy's active hope, isn't it? So we can, when we lose faith and we feel that despair, we have to remember and we have to find the people who are already doing what our hearts know is true, what our hearts know needs to be done. And also within all of that, we're healing. We're healing and we need to rest and we need time and we need space. So it's an absolute dance, because if I go too far into warrior mode and doing mode, even if it's in total alignment, my
Yeah.
body shouts no. And so we have to do it with celebration and with rest and with joy and together. We can't burn ourselves out trying to heal the world, because that's
Mm-hmm.
a part of the problem.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. I always put it on our little brochures and things, but out to the world that, this is deep work. I want to get across that it's serious. Like, if you could do anything at all, there's going to be tears. There's got to be time for the grief you're talking about. That really has to be felt, and it's
Mm.
surprising. Some of our rituals, I say, right, everybody who has feeling grief right now, on your knees in front of the stream or something like that, in front of the altar, and please bring tears into the ritual. And you think, well, who's going to do that? And there's 100 people there. 25 people immediately jump up and start crying. And it's like, so that has to be there. I don't want to be like, oh, it's all. But then there also has to be those joyous things, and there has to be fun. It's a strange thing. It protects us against kind of too much anger. It's very easy to be angry about what's going on in the world. I certainly am, but it's not very useful, and continually doing somehow or other. There does have to be those cycles of meeting a challenge and then rest and repose and time for song and time for enjoying. And if we get that, we're going to forget a lot. And that's already been educated out of us a little bit too. The world is also, like, you get people, I'm sure, come just have a rest,
Mm.
just to take a break. The activity is too intense. There's too many things calling at us. What was it I wanted to say there? You said something so good.
There was something I wanted to add, which is just that, that it comes back to what you're saying of it's not about telling everyone, putting orders in, okay, you need to build this, you need to do that, you need to cut the wood to create this new earth. We need to teach people. There is a quote at the back of my mind, but I can't remember who said it. We need to teach people instead to yearn for the vast and endless ocean, to yearn for the mountains and the forest. And I think that's essentially at the essence of Spirit Horse from what I perceive. And with rooted healing, it's in creating new earth or ancient earth or however you want to phrase it, um, that love affair has to be reactivated because informed futility isn't working. We, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
people aren't changing just by knowing the facts. We
Yeah, or
have to feel love.
yeah, that's it. I mean, maybe some of the rage and anger that's so easy to feel, or that comes out sometimes in activism, so called, doesn't quite right. It's not deep enough. It's not all of our levels meeting all the other levels. A real natural process going through the whole body. So there's we have to find the wild in ourselves, but also find the peace and the love and the happiness all in ourselves. And it's great if you can go and sit by a waterfall, being as angry as hell. That I don't understand why people do lose connection to nature. Like pretty much everybody that comes to our valley falls in love with it somehow or other. But then in the field next door, it's a bare field, and the next one after that, and the next one after that, and the next one after that, all subsidized by governments and sheep
Mm,
rearing and other, a complete and utter monoculture. And no one
yeah.
seems to, well, I suppose, no, I was going to say no one feels angry about it, no one feels sad about it. But I feel all those emotions about it. And the more you see it, the more it's like, oh my goodness, it almost needs to, all right, stop being angry. We're just going to do what we can, a little bit by little bit, and yeah, retain that balance. There's got to be times you feel grief, times you feel joy, like you say, in the cycle. In fact, there's something amazing about the female cycle where one half of the month, another half of the month, you can go down and deep. Guys can't really do that so much. Go
Mm,
down into the place where everything is wrong and that's it, and back to a place where everything's abundantly happening, and you can just see the brightness of it, and that spreads its sort of ripples of joy to everything around. Those cycles have to be there, don't they? And we can't do ourselves in trying to save the world. In fact, I think anyone who's doing that's probably on some crazy mission. We just have to, what's the word? You do what you do because you want to express your own nature, and be daring enough, like to show how vulnerable you are, how childlike, and how important those little gardens are, or this
mm,
little tree. I got crazy occasionally with people who cut a branch off a tree, and it's like there's like a little kid in me, like, why couldn't you just leave the tree alone, or leave the birds alone? It's a very small, tender place, but it comes out a little bit angry sometimes.
mm.
But really, it's an incredible tenderness. I don't get why people don't have that
Mm.
towards the green carpet of the world. I don't get it.
I think a part of it is shifting baseline syndrome, and people, unless you've had a deep relationship at some point with the original state of wilderness, um, or just lovely rewilded parts of the countryside here in Britain, for example, um, you can't, you might see some fields and see the green and think, well, that's the countryside, that's green.
Yes, yes, yes.
The more ecologically aware we become, the more of a relationship we build. I think a lot of spiritual teachings say, well, you don't need to learn the names of things, you just be with the tree. And actually, what we're teaching with rooted healing is, well, there's so much story and history and context with a name, and with once you name something and you know something, you know its stories, and you've worked with it in a tea or whatever it is, then you start seeing it and you start having this much more deeper relationship with it. So there's a sense of, actually, let's become really ecologically aware and rebuild that indigenous way of being with the land, where we know our medicines and we know our food systems and what we're really a part of here. It sounds so silly, but I get so much pleasure from using compost loos. Like, that was the agreement. And for example, at Kaimabon, I'm sure you're familiar with them. The poo then gets put around the base of the apple trees, and then suddenly you get these tomato plants appearing at the base of the apple trees, and there's this sense of, that was the agreement. We were supposed to eat things and give the seeds back to the earth.
Of
um
course, yeah.
And it can really come down to the most basic things of like, yeah, where we shit and how we do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
um,
really.
and
Uh,
and there's another piece I wanted to add, because we were running the psilocybin retreats in the Netherlands, and Netherlands is so flat, and as someone from West Wales, I really struggle with that flat landscape. And you can always hear tractors going, and you can always see this sort of rural setting. It's not wild at all, actually, even if the retreat centre had, some real wilded patches. And it really was stirring me, and these distant sounds of tractors were just sort of grating on my chest. And I had to do a lot of work around, well, we do need agriculture, and
yeah.
there's something to be said about developing a healthy relationship with the right kind of agriculture, and really being in harmony, having those wild edges, and supporting the local farmers and the organic farmers. And yeah, it's some of the land here, I think it can be beautifully farmed and beautifully done. And that's how I grew up. We grew up on a farm that was in a really beautiful relationship between the wildlife and
Mm.
the farming happenings on the land, and how the two could really support each other as well.
Yeah, it stuck with me, and I used to spend my summer holidays, every one of them, in the 60s in the west of Ireland. And everybody grew their own food, everybody made their own butter. Seems like a bygone, well, it is a bygone age now. It's not in my lifetime, not in my grandfather's lifetime or something, but everybody before that would have known exactly what that is, to milk your own cow, make your own butter, grow the cabbage, potato. Everybody kept pig. All those little things, like, which seem very simple, but those are lost. That way of life's gone. It's all, become wrapped up in more a slicker economy and so forth, with less work and less hardship, but the conversations, the neighborliness, the connection, it's gone, gone, gone.
Mm.
So for sure we need to do that. Maybe there is such a thing as sacred farming, some in between place. I have a little bit of land in Ireland. We're experimenting, and in Wales we've kept it though as like, let's just have a sanctuary that doesn't. If people say, "Oh, you grow your own food," or something. Nope, we just let everything go wild. Just want
Mm.
one little 200-acre patch, just let go wild. Mother Nature does whatever she likes. Oh, and you're going to prune that or move? No, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to let that bit go wild. But yeah, obviously the next step would be, you know, to have somewhere for the kids to grow up, have a different kind of education, have a farm, have a school, have gardens, and all
Mm.
those things. I'll leave that to your generation. Sort all that
Yeah.
out. That's a whole big transition to do there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, people have, like that point you made. I'm always like, people get to someone step out the car from town, and they step out into like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, 8 huge fields with one hawthorn field tree at the far end. And say, "Oh, it's
Mm.
great to be in nature." And I said, "Listen, man, this ain't nature.
Hmm.
Come with me, and I'm down into the valley, and we'll have a look at what." And they said, "Well, aren't you going to cut these back?" Or, "No, this is wild nature, and it's going to be left wild, and that's that." Like, 1,000 trees growing in 2 square meters. The
Yeah.
abundance. Most people don't get to see how abundant nature is. We let our land rewild, so it's completely left to itself. We didn't plant. We
Mm.
do plant the odd tree, but basically it's just doing its own thing. And there are little tiny islands on lakes in Scotland, and a little bit maybe in England and in Ireland. There's a few where you can actually. There's very small places where nobody has ever farmed. And I
Mm.
think a lot of people have never seen those places, never been to one, never never been there in the month of April, where there is no grass. The whole of this little island I go to is wooded and covered in a carpet of flowers. You can't walk anywhere without walking on flowers. It's
Mm.
one of the most beautiful. I mean, natural setting, I think, in the world anyway. The British woods, when they're fully in flower, and all the violets and primroses, and they carpet the ground completely. That should be like, anybody who says they're British should have seen that at least, or stepped in it,
Yeah.
walked in it, smelt it, slept among it, and made a campfire and slept on flowers. But
Mm.
many people have never done that. Never ever done
No.
that. They don't even know it exists. That is what Britain looks like if you take away the farm grants to the sheep, the cattle, and all the other nonsense, which we won't go into on this program. But just
Oh,
that like how disconnected we are, that we say nature, thinking those green fields are nature, and we also think that once we, I'm going to get too critical here. when we're trying to remake culture, which is kind of what you're talking about, the songs,
Mm.
the stories, connection with ancestor, connection with place. I'm not a big fan of Latin names, but all right, bioregionalism. Um, so,
I
uh,
understand.
so it's kind of like it's my valley, isn't it? Or something like
Yeah,
that in plain Anglo-Saxon. Uh, it, um, yeah,
I hear you.
if you're
Yeah.
trying to go there,
Yeah. It's,
it's a long road.
and it's just not going to be available for everyone. Some people will only find ways in the cities, I think. They're just, if they've like generations and generations in the cities, and you do see these amazing inner city projects, but who knows? Who knows what's coming up? Sometimes I get full on dystopic, more pandemics are probably coming, rising sea levels. It can,
Yeah,
the list is endless. But coming back to the land, coming back to our sense of rootedness and belonging, because once we feel belonging, we don't want all the things that harm the world. All we want is songs and stories and good food and connection with the community. That is all the human condition
yeah,
needs.
that's what we really want. Absolutely. I don't make found the most convoluted, lost ways of going about it. Some people occasionally say to me, "Well, look, Shivan, we can't all go back to the Stone Age," and it's kind of like, "No, you can't, but I can." And
Yeah.
you know, I'll sit by the fire and watch the wood smoke curl into the sky occasionally. But it does turn out to be hard work, actually. Running these kind of retreats and trying to make these things happen is ends up being hard work, like everything else.
Mm.
But yeah, there's no. I think we can do ourselves in trying to find the answer because there probably isn't one. Um, but if you, but there's so much to be said for each day, just following where your soul takes you, and a little bit of the Stone Age might do us the world of good. It
Yeah.
I had, there are a lot of people that come to Spirit Horse and they only come for our big gathering. They're not really want to do all our self-inquiry, meditation, Buddhism, deep end ritual. They like just come for this family community kind of thing we have called Cauldron Plenty. It's only 5 days, bank holiday August kind of thing, and bring a tent and bring the kids and bring the auntie. But for many people, that becomes still a very important sort of spiritual home. They just for 5 days they could watch the kids run off to the cave and the waterfall and run around in the woods or whatever. So I often think, well, all right, a bit of time in nature is good, but people come with tears in their eyes and say they've had life transforming things happen to them. I don't know
Mm.
why, and that's how we ended up fundraising. And managed to raise enough money to buy that land. None of us were rich, none of us had money. Our courses never really made much money or like, barely covered their own costs. But nevertheless, people felt, well, at least there's somewhere, some little spiritual, some sanctuary, some little bit, some
Mm.
haven, some sacred land that is never going to be commercially used, that's going to be allowed to go wild, and I can throw my ancestors' ashes there or something like that, or let my kids run around. Even that might be a transitory step, because a lot of people do come from Birmingham, Manchester, London, or wherever.
Mm. In fact,
And
I mean, I would really love to turn the table and ask you what that process was like getting the land, because so many people in my echo chamber are hungry to find alternative ways to root down in community together and get land, and just feels like a big mountain to climb.
well, the living in community is a big mountain to climb. I know from experience what it takes to buy a piece of land, let it go wild, and run courses there. But living there together, that's a different story. I do
Mm.
have like usually we have some kind of a posse or crew, maybe a dozen or 25 people, some sort of figure between that run the show during the summer when we run our retreats. And in that sense, we live together like a nomadic community for the summer hoop. But
Yeah.
then in winter, everyone disperses and goes off and does their own thing. I've given a few talks, and I think there's one or two of them on the website,
Hmm.
warning people almost. I don't want to be a downer all the time, but if you want to, buy some land and set up a community, don't. It's just it's just too much hard work. We haven't learned how to live together. But
Mm.
maybe as far as we got with that experiment is that we did start out renting a corner of a field from some Welsh farmers with three teepees and a Bedouin tent, and then next year we had a couple of yurts, we took that road, put workshops on, and it wouldn't stop growing. I thought it was just me that really urgently wanted this, so I threw everything I had at it, all my time and energy, my youth, whatever. But other people did want it, and it grew and it grew and it wouldn't stop growing. And then, we hard fundraised for about 12 years to raise £500,000 to go to the farmers and give them a good offer and buy this little piece of land. And then just let it all grow wild and kept it as a sanctuary just for doing that. So we got that far. But then people always say, well, you're going to grow your own food and people are going to live here. So we're at the cusp of that. That's where we should be going next. But I know the dangers of that. I live in community all the time. There's always people living in my house, and there's people living up, say, for 6, 7, 8 months during the summer and autumn, running courts. So all the interpersonal, all the there's a lot to say about it. So there's a lot of work to be done there, and it's got to happen though. At some point, or maybe the next generation, the children, so forth, have to be brought up in that environment, knowing how to do it. And that's where maybe the people in the Amazon or elsewhere in the Himalayas, where people have lived on their land for centuries happily with their neighbors without destroying. Because, well, how do they do it? They have lots of very neighborly practices. They have common cultural, religious things that they've kept going for customs, and where the water comes from to flood the paddy fields, and it all looks kind of gorgeous. But those arts of neighborliness and how to be together and how much to expect of another person or of the in-laws of another family of the neighboring village, those are that's the cultural ecology. That's the mycelium. That I think we've lost that. So we come with some big, bonking, great, nice idea. Let's all buy land, and then we're going to live in paradise, and it's all going to be great. No, it's not. We haven't got the tools for it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I'm not saying people shouldn't try.
What comes to mind when I hear you say that, because it is, you hear this again and again, that it isn't really working, that there's just too much interpersonal difficulty and challenges after so many generations of not doing this. But what comes to mind is I learned recently that 80% of the world's biodiversity rich places are stewarded by indigenous peoples. 80%. I just and I see that, as well as just really wanting to root locally, but whilst we have globalized Wi-Fi and connection and all of this, I see that there are indigenous leaders who can help us reestablish more ancient ways. And I do see that there's a role to play in stepping back as a sort of Western indoctrinated white person, and seeing, okay, what's the wisdom I need to hear in this situation, but then the dance of applying that to our culture and how we find ways to do it together is definitely challenging. I do agree with you, actually, that the most fulfilling communities I've lived in have been more of a retreat type offering and setting, where everyone has a different role and there's people coming in and coming out, and there's a sort of organic fluidity, rather than when I've gone to stay with permanent communities, co-owned communities. There's been a lot more quite deeper tensions flowing through that. You can feel it in the air.
That's it, yeah. No, I don't want to sound like people shouldn't try this. Just, I would say, don't go into it too idealistically, lightheaded. Just be prepared for all the usual challenges of being with other people times 10. And, and if you've got the stomach for that. And I have pretty much, spent a lot of my life doing that. And there's, we're very idea people from our culture, and, thinking and all the rest of it, which is not the same as just being brought up. Well, no one's had to do it before, like reinvent the culture, reinvent what family, tribe, community, land connection is. Before, you grew up in it and you were a part of it, and that's natural, and that's how it should be. But to have to step back from your own culture and think, my family, my tribe, my industrial conglomerate mess is not where I belong, and I've got to rethink it. Like, we haven't had to do that before, so that's a huge challenge. So everyone should be forgiven, right? You don't know how to do it, and it's difficult, and maybe you tried and it failed, or maybe you tried and it partially succeeded, whatever. But no one's really equipped for that. Like, it's unnatural task in the first place. So that's I suppose there's something it's the thing that has to happen though. It's somehow or other we have to find a way. I'm just very much an admirer of like those. I'm so grateful that there are those communities in the world, you know, that still are have that, and like you
Yeah.
say, they're involved in their landscape. So even a tiny little 30-year-old experiment like Spirit Horse is a mixture of people and land. Like it provides a spiritual sanctuary, even if it's only for a weekend, to some people, and that was like a sprout that sprung up. That was like a
Mm.
possibility, and we just went for it. It's like, well, at least we do that.
Yeah.
So that's you know, people and land. People often say, "Oh, I'm so in love with the land here," and all of it. I said, "Yeah, but the people had to find a way to collaborate together ecstatically. I mean, we didn't do it from kind of we've got to save the world somehow. Who's got some money? We it was kind of like we're in love with this place. This is beautiful. Look at the music we had last night. Look at the fire. Look at the trees. Look at the flowers. Look at these rivers. It was a kind of like let's preserve it. And the only way to do it was to buy it. You know, in the moment, that's land ownership
Yeah.
and all that. So it was like let's get the money. How can we get the money? And then it was like, well, I've got this and I've got that, and that was a it was an ecstatic thing to it. You know, so it was
Mm.
like, yeah, we want to preserve this. We want to get the sheep off. We want to let the flowers return, and you could, you know, cry the tears for so much that's lost. But it was also quite hilarious fun at times. The lengths we went to raise money, and everybody had this one. There was about 200 people involved in that, and a core team of about 30 or 40. But everybody's going for one thing, and that in itself, you know, and we had a common enemy because it might get bought by someone else who doesn't give a damn. So
Yeah.
that's how you create community. You have one goal, you have a war or something like that, and a common enemy. But then when peace comes and you've achieved what you want, how to stay happy together, not so easy.
Mm.
But
Mm.
again, like
Monkey minds.
well, you know, people are complicated. I'm
Yeah.
complicated. Other people seem even more complicated, and you mix a whole load of them together, and you get even more complication. But
I think,
yeah, again,
yeah.
not to be too negative. Like I'm really like we think we just do what we can do. I think you are doing what you can do, and we're doing something very similar, which is the best I can hope for. Though I'll try with the amount of energy and time and whatever.
Yeah.
However, when there's a new generation, and there is young, more informed people, then shower my blessing. If someone comes and says, "I got the answer. I know how to save the world. I can save the forest," and I go, right, go ahead. Like, what's your plan? Like, how can I help? Or if I can't help, well, good luck. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's different layers of the ecosystems of our culture and our emergence, isn't there? Because people come to Spirit Horse and people come to our ancestral gathering or whatever other gathering we're holding, and they'll taste it, they'll feel it in their bodies. Oh, okay, yeah, this is what it can feel like to
Yeah.
belong, to be in relationship with the land, to connect with people, to share, be seen, be witness. And they will, you just have to trust that those seeds have been planted at a somatic level and experiential level, and they will spread, and people
Mm,
take them into their communities and lives in whatever subtle or really magnificent huge ways they will ignite and continue. And in that sense, I think the land does continue to express itself through the people who visit and go back out into the world. You know, there's this sort of collective dreaming that we're all doing. And the more
mm,
we tend to the fire, to the hearth, and to our togetherness and our remembering, the more alive that will
mm.
be. And I truly believe in some sort of collective consciousness, or maybe Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance, whatever it is. I believe that memory is inherent in us, in nature, in habit. And I truly believe that the more we commit ourselves, the more time we give our lives to sitting in circles, singing, dancing, being together, planting trees, tending to the garden, tending to the village, the more that wakes up in the collective consciousness. And whether we're posting about it on Instagram or not, I think that there's something
Yeah.
really deep that happens when we do tend to
Mm.
those moments. And
Well, yeah,
yeah.
beautifully said. Like we do what we can. We don't know the short or long term effects really of what or how we affect other people. The other is always a mystery, and who knows. And I'm often very surprised by how deeply moved people are by quite small things. I'm always like trying to offer some big enlightenment experience to people, but no, sometimes the smallest things can really touch all of us and mean a lot, and you never know what repercussions that's going to have. I like the way you put
Mm.
it. That's a nice hopeful thing. Um, Dad's telling me that we got just a couple of minutes left. We try and keep it to an hour or thereabouts. But so if we have a few more minutes, can I ask you, like, you're the sort of founder of your organization, aren't you? Like, you set it up.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
uh, people often want to get together and do something collectively, which is what we've been talking about. But somebody has to really want to do it, doesn't it?
Mm.
Someone has to, like, carry it in their belly, put their neck on the line, give it all their time, energy, and money. I do believe in leadership, but not leadership in, people bossing each other around in some corporate way. But you really got to put your chips down to make something happen.
Mm.
Can you tell me what that's like for you?
That's such a lovely question, actually. It makes me feel quite seen. Yeah, I've given it everything. I've
Yeah.
put huge deposits down on places and had no idea if people would come. I've just made it my life's work. I haven't been able to afford rent for a couple of years, but I found alternative ways to live healthily and
Mm.
well. And I'm now getting to a point with the work where, I don't, I do need to do less. There's always work to be done. I think when you actually are the person really making the thing run, I always have every day. It's like, oh, today could be a 12-hour day if I really feel like it, or I can actually really look at my work-life balance. Um, so there's something of a sacrifice, but it brings me the deepest joy to see what is happening, and I love it, especially in person. Seeing the shifts happen, the transformations happen, it's so meaningful. My career previously was in theatre, which in itself is a real well, hustle probably is the word. But actually, so much of that has been able to come with me because, we're telling stories, we're singing songs, we're holding ceremonies. We don't put playlist on and sort of give everyone I must. That's not our approach. We're doing it entirely with songs that come from our hearts, music that comes from instruments that are in the
Hmm.
space in the altar. And that is, I'm in my happy place. And I know that this is deep work and it's needed work. So that's what motivates me. But I do feel in my body that I'm wanting to step towards mother in the coming years. Like it's
Mm.
really alive for me. And that's bringing up so many more questions of, okay,
Yeah.
what am I really creating here? How much is the next generation going to come into this? Am I going to start working actually more with youth and with children? um how does psilocybin, what are the legalities going to look like? I want to be rooted. I don't want to be having to always travel to a country where it's legal and allowed. And
Mm.
so there's a lot brewing of how to evolve my offerings and rooted healings offerings with what's happening in my body and what's
Mm.
transforming through me. And I think it's a constant organic process. And, I'm supported with some really beautiful people and facilitators, and the dream is so alive. But there are definitely days where I'm just exhausted, and I'd quite
Yes.
happily take a paycheck and like a simple, nice job
Yes.
somewhere, so that I still have that inner inner movings, but then I
Yeah.
remember that I would hate it.
Yeah, no, I totally get you, and I totally get you, and I can hear you as a woman too. I had, similar questions, but I'm on the man side of things. But for sure, very deep questions when you're trying to do work like that, and it would be sometimes nice to have I see some people get have a regular little job and they go back to a little house and they go, oh God, that'd be so simple.
Yeah.
Why am I doing all this stuff? And yet creativity is a mysterious thing. It's if you allow yourself time to be quiet and go into the body and meditate or touch the source a little bit, that's very well. But then the creativity comes. It's quite an amazing dance where you get called to do something. Sometimes very big things. I've taken on things that have taken me decades to. It seemed like a good idea. There it is. Yeah, let's do that. It's good. And who wants to do it? Yeah, yeah, But at the end of the day, someone's got to see it through. And
Yeah.
it might, nothing really useful gets done in less than a 9-year cycle. Once you're out of your 20s, 6-month projects don't work. So no, I really get you what you say, and there's something very deep in us could do with the water poured on it to help
Mm.
it grow, and it is kind of tough, and there are financial things and life decisions you have to make to make something beautiful happen. And really, you got to chance it sometimes. You got to just throw yourself to the wild winds and see what
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And we could be so resource in nature when that love affair is alive and all hope is lost or you despair, you have the wild places to go to. And that's how I resource myself
Mm.
as someone who is actually having to spend quite a lot of time in the 2D world
Yeah.
just to, run the really deep and meaningful in-person 3D, 5D, whatever it is,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
experiences. So
Mm.
yeah, dancing with it all. But I will always come back to that sense of if it all crashed and we suddenly had no internet and we had no way to market our events and no way to do these lovely podcasts, as much as I love them, I'd be like, oh, we actually have to start going to our local storytellers for our wisdom and inspiration. And we have to start doing this and walking there and riding there. And I'd welcome it. I sort of, yeah, I think when I lived in the city, before I had my spiritual awakening, to call it that, I would look at the plants growing from the rocks on the railway lines, and I think, oh, nature just would take this city over. It wouldn't take long, that
Yeah.
strength and that feeling of the capacity for rewilding has just always brought me so much solace. And as it might sound dystopic to think, well, where would the humans go if that were to happen? But
Mm.
I think there's something, for me at least, comforting in knowing how quickly those weeds, those quote unquote weeds, can grow through the cracks. And I think that the exact same thing happens in our psyches. We can be rewilded much more quickly than we think. And that's my hope and that's my prayer, is that we all
Mm.
start remembering and living lives that actually are in true alignment with a real essence of who we are and what's important.
On that hopeful note, I think, and I can feel it coming from you. It's delightful to to hear your love of what you're talking about. I was going to ask you loads of questions about ancestral roots and about story and ritual and how we recover the stories and how we recover the rituals. And maybe I won't grill you with any of those things because they're all an ongoing experiment for all of us anyway.
Mm.
I think it's better to leave it there. I really like that, to end on that, for all of us to stay personal and individual, and not just have too many ideas. I'm a bit of an idea person, but at the end of the day, our own little personal journeys and our our how happy Kabir is. He sings inside his own little boat. The inner joy is important, and I sense it coming from you, and you're lending me a tiny bit of hope, and maybe that's a good place to end with. We started big subjects, these are huge issues of our time, and we could talk for a long time about them. But we're all trying to put a message out and do something useful. So maybe we check in again at a future time and see how things are going. All right, we'll leave it
Yeah.
like that for now. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's perfect.
So
No,
when
thank you. It's been lovely.
So if people want to connect with you and find out what you're doing and where your courses are and all that sort of thing, can you rattle out your website or how you like people to contact you?
Yeah, everything is at rootedhealing.org. We've got a really gorgeous online course, which is actually not really online at all. It takes people out into the wild so much. It's really beautiful. And we've got lots of ways to gather in person. And who knows, maybe we can bring a rooted healing event to Spirit Horse. That would be an exciting prospect. At the moment,
No.
we're in North Wales for our ancestral gathering at Caimabon, not too far from you. And yeah, rootedhealing.org. We also have a podcast of our own, so you can check that out too.
Well, call in for a cup of tea at Spear Horse after you've been in Kaimabon, maybe.
Yeah, I'd
Just
love to.
just down the road, and yeah, and so Eric's done a good job up there. I haven't visited for years and years and years, but yeah, we started around the same time actually doing that stuff and trying to create something, and he's stuck at it. So and
Hmm.
yeah, we're all we're all giving it a shot.
Yeah.
These arrows might land somewhere. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really enjoyed talking to you. So
Likewise.
good
Thank
luck with
you.
what you're doing.
Thank you.